I am on a book tour. I am a first-time author on a book tour. And it's taking me away from my family. I live in Palo Alto, Silicon Valley, California. I've been gone on this particular swing since October 3rd. I went first to DC and its environs, and then I came to Chicago last Thursday. And I'm delighted with the resonance Chicago has had with my message. I've been in Memphis and Miami and Dallas and Los Angeles and DC and Northern Virginia and Maryland and my own Bay Area, but no region has embraced this message more than Chicago. I've had 13 different events. Yeah, Chicago, woo! Go Cubbies! I don't even like baseball, but I'm so excited for you guys. And you know, I'm a Midwesterner at heart. I live in the Bay Area, Northern California, where we say dude. We actually do. But I went to high school a few hours north in Middleton, Wisconsin. Woo! And one of my fondest memories, it's actually not a fond memory, it's a terrible memory, of my time at Middleton was when somebody said to me, I was at a pool one day, and someone said, "Oh my gosh, you're so tan." And I said, "Yes, it is August. I am tan, but I'm also black." And I'm sure those of you here in Chicagoland are a little bit more savvy about those matters than were the folks in Middleton, Wisconsin in the 80s, and that's one of the reasons I sought refuge in Northern California. But despite that bad memory, it sure is good to be back. I am a Midwesterner in my heart, and there's something about folks here that I think is very special and really doesn't quite exist anywhere else. And when I was saying to somebody, why is it, I wonder, that Chicagoans are so embracing of this message, somebody said, well, you know, we're thoughtful folk, and when something is wrong, we want to do something about it. It was that simple. I think in other regions, there's still I'm not sure, I don't think you're talking about us. Not here. You guys are like, bring it on. Let's talk about this, and I appreciate that. Forgot to give a shout out to the book stall. They're selling the books later tonight. So grateful for you guys and for any local bookseller these days. It's really important that we support them by buying books from them, so thanks to the book stall for being here. So, yes, absolutely. So let's get on with it. So I named the people who had something to do with my visit here to Glenbrook North and to the Family Action Network. But for the rest of you who came to be in the audience, who have plenty of other places to be or things to do right now, children, family, work, hobbies, significant others, stuff, but you've chosen to be here on this Wednesday night, I want to thank you. Like you, I'm a parent. I've got a 14-year-old freshman daughter and a 16-year-old junior son. And like you, I'm just trying to ensure my kids are healthy and successful. Like you, I worry and I wonder and I wish. We're in this together, all of us, parents, and I appreciate that you've chosen to be here. Now, normally at an event like this, with a human being behind a podium, in front of an audience, an enormous audience, we would ask you to put away your phones. But with my new book, How to Raise an Adult, I'm joining this movement to try to push the parenting pendulum back in the other direction, away from raising kids to be completely dependent upon us for protection, accustomed to our fervent direction, and reliant upon us for constant assistance, and toward raising independent adults. And if the movement's not to be televised, as they used to say back in the day, well, then at least it can be socialized. So whip out those phones, actually. I don't know if I have to ask Lonnie's permission. She's in charge of this whole thing. Is it all right? Thank you, Lonnie. Whip out those phones and use them. If you're on Facebook, head over to my books page. Actually, probably head over to the Family Action Network and like it. And then like How to Raise an Adult on Facebook. And take a picture of yourself with the book later and post it. And if you're on Twitter, our handle is @RaiseAnAdult. And you can live tweet this event. And you can tweet your takeaways after. And if you don't have a clue what I'm talking about, yes, put away your phone, or at least turn off that ringer and make eye contact with me. That's a precious resource these days, and I'm going to need that too. So we're here tonight to discuss my book, How to Raise an Adult, which, with its publication just over 4 months ago, has branded me as somewhat of a quote-unquote parenting expert. But to be frank, I'm not so sure how I feel about that. I mean, I didn't set out to be a parenting expert. And for that matter, I'm not particularly interested in parenting. No. And now some of you are wondering, well, what the heck am I here for then? I was sure she was going to talk about parenting. I came here on a Wednesday night. I got dragged here by my spouse on a perfectly wonderful evening to hear a talk on parenting, some of you are thinking. But even at the risk of your disappointment or confusion, I'm going to say it again. I'm not interested in parenting per se. No. What I'm interested in is human beings. You see, I believe in humans. I believe that each of us, you, me, you way in the back, deserve the chance to make our way in the world. I believe this is essential, not only for the sake of each individual, but for the sake of us all. I believe the world needs us, each one of us, to figure out who we are and what we're good at and what we love and what we value, and then to find work at the intersection of those things and try our very best to be the best version of ourselves we can muster. From my own life journey, which began as a corporate lawyer, and then I became a university dean, and now I'm a writer, and from my work with countless young adults. There were 17,000 students who came through Stanford when I was dean, and I knew thousands of them. I've learned that having the courage to be who we actually are, regardless of what other people want or expect or demand or say, even parents, is the path to a meaningful and rewarding adult life. And so I'm interested in what gets in the way of any of us having the chance to be our best self. I'm interested in the obstacles, and I'm interested in trying to do something about those obstacles. Now, I used to think the obstacles stemmed chiefly from otherness, from outsider status, from being on the margins due to family background, circumstance, demographics. And yes, of course, those things can be obstacles. Sometimes they are tremendous obstacles to a person's chances for becoming their best self. When I was freshman dean at Stanford, I presumed those students would most need a caring, thoughtful dean, someone to believe in them when their background and family narrative would collide with all that Stanford would ask and expect of them. And some of my favorite moments as dean were indeed spent mentoring such students. But since I was expecting that the students who would most need my help would be the other, well, imagine how surprised I was to discover among my more affluent, well-heeled, well-connected students, a growing number, who didn't seem confident in their own ability to act as an adult, who lacked a kind of confidence that frankly was just typical in 18 to 22-year-olds in the past, who as an age cohort used to desire, to hunger for their own right to be themselves, to be independent, after all. I couldn't quite tell what was going on at first. Something was just a little odd, a little off. It took most of my 10 years as dean to figure out what the problem was and where it had come from. For starters, each year, my students were more and more and more and more accomplished. They had done so much as children. You know what I mean? Let's be real, Glenbrook North. You know exactly what I mean. The right school, like this one. Not just the right school, but the right classes in the right school. Not just the right classes, but the right grades in the right classes at the right school. And the visit with tutors and coaches and specialists designed to ensure the right grades were gotten. And not just the grades, the scores and the hours of test prep that go into those scores. And not just the grades and the scores, but the accolades and the awards. And not just that, the sports and the activities. And not just that, the leadership. Don't just join a club, start a club, because colleges want to see it. And community service, don't forget that, check that box. And all of this done to some hoped-for degree of perfection. Yes, in a transcript and resume sense, my students were more and more accomplished each year. Yet, each year I noticed more students could tell you what they'd done, but not so much why they had done it, except to get into college. Could tell you what they'd achieved, but not whether any of it really mattered to them. These students were far more interesting to look at on paper than to talk with in person. Wow, someone said. Exactly. Was any of this stuff really their passion? Or was passion just something everyone said they had to discover? Find your passion, quick, because colleges want to see it. Did they have a sense of self budding, starting to bud within them? Or were they, in fact, content to have their parents plan and assist with every step of their life for them? Did they think a B really was failure? Or were they just saying so? And why was it so hard for them to cope with it when it came? Could they take the initiative, or were they just incredibly good at doing as they were told? I believe in humans, and seeing a growing number of promising young adults walking a path of someone else's making, lacking confidence in their own ability to set out in life on their own, already a little burned out, kind of old before their time. Well, this perplexed and worried me. Now, as this was going on, each year brought more and more and more and more parents who came with their kid to college and stayed. You're laughing now, but let me tell you, occasionally, literally, they stayed, but more often virtually, to ask questions like, my son wants to do research in chemical engineering, so I'd like to have an in-depth conversation with you about the opportunities available in research. My daughter will be studying abroad with you in a couple quarters, and when is your parent orientation for study abroad? Okay, we thought. Can't your student be responsible for gathering and synthesizing this information for themselves? Now, parents first began asking these questions in the late 1990s at Stanford, and as it would turn out, at pretty much every four-year college around the country, as we would discover in conferences with colleagues all over. Parents first began wanting to ask these questions and be involved in these ways on college and university campuses in the late 1990s, and I'll confess we giggled, just like you did. This is college, we thought. And we wrote them off as oddities. But as they grew in number every year and expected to play a role in the life of the day-to-day life of their student, well, we stopped laughing. This type of parent wanted to select courses, activities, majors, internships, and careers, solve problems such as a missed deadline, handle conflicts such as a disagreement over a grade, defend and advocate for their student when issues arose, track academic deadlines, have their password, register them for classes, fill out applications, and call to wake them up. I was at the University of Miami in Florida last month, and the vice president for student affairs told me that a parent had installed a webcam in the dorm. Not to record what you think you might, I don't know what you think you might do with a webcam in a dorm, but to wake the kid up. And to top it all off, the students associated with these over-involved parents were not mortified when their parents did all of this. No, they were grateful. This is what worried me the most. No hunger to do for themselves, no eye rolling, no shaking the parents off. No, they were quite reliant upon this constant closeness with a parent or two, communicated with a parent multiple times a day, as became the norm in recent years for college students, communicating with a parent in the dorm, in the dining halls, in the student union, going to class, going to another class, going somewhere after class, in the lobby of the advising office where I worked, even in my office. The phone would buzz. "It's my mom," they'd say sheepishly with a shrug. "Do you mind if I just, Mom?" I thought to myself, is this college or middle school? How many of you have heard of the movie The Stepford Wives? Raise your hands high. I've just outed your age by asking you this question. It's a 1975 feminist allegory of women who were not actually humans, but instead were robots programmed by their husbands to be the paradigmatic perfect wife. Well, that movie came to mind as I watched my students live their college lives, still somehow looking over to the sidelines of their lives for mom or dad's direction, protection, or intervention, as if they were 5 years old, playing soccer, and needed a parent to point in which direction to kick the ball. I began to wonder, are we raising Stepford children? Of course, closeness, affection, love, frequent communication, that's all good. But when the dynamic between parent and adult child is this constant chatter about choices, possibilities, and outcomes, the should and shouldn'ts of life, the want to and the ought nots, the how do I do this and the let me take care of that for yous, when it came to all manner of their academic, professional, emotional, and personal lives, this intertwinedness moved, in my view, from a cute family portrait to a rather disfigured picture of a chronologically adult man or woman incapable of fending for themselves. Such students were not only talking about the joys of life and big life decisions with parents, which I think is quite natural and appropriate. These students turned to a parent whenever something went even mildly wrong. Couldn't locate a class, missed a deadline, got a flat tire on their bike, had a problem with a roommate, got less than great on an assignment, as if their actual biological instinct was to call or text a parent. An instinct as natural and seemingly as essential to their well-being as taking a breath of air. And mom or dad were right there with the assist. In contrast to their peers in the student community who could contend with choices, options, discomfort, disappointment, and mull it over in their own hearts and minds for a bit, and then go seek some advice and guidance from parents and other mentors. These other students, the ones I'm concerned about, didn't seem to believe that they had any wherewithal within their own selves to contend with what life would throw their way in the normal course of things. So intertwined with their parents, it seemed they didn't really know how to be, B-E, italics. They didn't know how to be their own selves. It looked to me like existential impotence. Now, as a believer in humans, that's what made me worry for the future for this population of young people who grew in number every year, and even for our future as a species, which I know sounds kind of hysterical. But when you work with thousands of the so-called best and brightest, and you see a growing number of them behaving this way, and then you talk with colleagues at colleges around the country, not just at the elite schools, but at schools in every tier, and they're seeing this, and you realize this isn't just a Stanford thing or a Bay Area thing, but a middle and upper middle class American thing nationwide, and you read that the rates of mental health problems in children and adolescents and young adults are at the same time soaring, particularly in affluent communities, and employers are saying, what is it with these 20-somethings? They just want to be told what to do and want to be applauded for doing it. They can't think for themselves. They can't take the initiative, anticipate next steps, pitch in. When you learn all of this, and you care about humans, you get concerned, really concerned. And that concern is what made me write How to Raise an Adult, a book on, well, as it would turn out, parenting. Excuse me. What's going on with how these kids are being raised, I asked myself. And I was mortified to discover the answer staring right back at me in my mirror one day. Every fall at freshman orientation, I got to give a talk to parents. The purpose of the talk was to embrace parents, empathize with the big transitions they were making, and give some pretty direct advice. I'd say, trust your son or daughter is capable of handling this. They've earned this. They have what it takes. I'd say, trust the institution. We're not trying to get away with doing as little as possible here. We're going to do as much as we can on your sons and daughters' behalf to educate them. Trust your kid, trust the institution. Now please leave was the third message. I never actually wagged my finger at parents, but inside, I'll confess to you, I was thinking, come on, folks, back off. This is college now. Not your college experience, but theirs. Go away. Well, in 2009, the day after giving that annual speech, I came home from work, sat down for dinner with my husband and 2 kids, who were 8 and 10 at the time. And I reached over and I began cutting my 10-year-old son's meat. And some of you are going, so? I did that yesterday. And it was like all of a sudden I was being visited by the ghost of Christmas future or something, like, if you ever want your kid to be independent, you have to stop cutting their meat. And I sat up straight, and I asked myself, well, when do you stop cutting their meat? When do you stop looking both ways for them as they cross the street? When do you stop over-helping with the homework? When do you let them talk to strangers? I realized I was still treating my kids like little kids, as if I'd always be there to think and plan and do for them. They never went anywhere alone. They had no responsibilities. Plus, I praised every little thing. I was micromanaging everything for them, trying to ensure the path in front of them was as lovely and as enriching and as smooth as possible by being on top of it all at all times. I was like the sous chef preparing and the dishwasher cleaning up, and my kids acted like Jacques Pepin or Julia Child, just having the experience. A day earlier, I'd been tisking my students' parents about being so involved in the lives of their college-age sons and daughters, only to realize I was incredibly over-involved in my own kids' lives with no end to that in sight. Was I in danger of being one of those parents who couldn't let go when my 2 kids went off to college? Oh my goodness, the thought mortified me. Well, that uncomfortable night, I realized I'd been given the rare gift of seeing the results of thousands of upbringings and childhoods in the form of other people's grown-up sons and daughters who had begun referring to themselves as kids in the last decade. College students did. How would my generation pass the mantle of leadership on to such adults? How did we get to this point? How the heck am I and countless other parents getting it so wrong? Because it's not as if we're not trying. Goodness knows, we're trying so very hard to get this parenting thing right. Am I right? For some perspective, I want to take you back now to how it all began with our infants. In the beginning, our love is our umbilicus, our heartbeat, our body. And then it is our arms, our kiss, our breast. We bring them home to a sheltering roof, and we delight weeks later when they make that first intentional eye contact with us. Remember? And we nurture early babbles into first words and applaud as they gain strength to roll over and sit up and crawl. We scan the horizon of the 21st century and see an increasingly interconnected and competitive world that at times seems familiar and at times utterly not. And we gaze down at our precious little one with a promise to do all we can to help them make their way into the long life that lies ahead. Now, there's no amount of direction on our part that'll force them to stand or walk before they're ready. So we watch eagerly and wait and clap. And when they fall, as they do, we don't say, "We expected more of you. You're closing doors on your future, you know. Your father is not going to be pleased." Of course not. Instead, we encourage them to get back up and try again. And if you think about it, that may be the last time when there's learning to stand and walk, maybe the last time we allow falling, failure, to be the essential teacher, the builder of a human's capabilities and strength and resilience. We see almost instantly that this little person is their own person. That personality comes out. But we also want them to start where we left off, to stand on our strong shoulders, to benefit from all we know and can provide, and rightly so. We expose them to experiences and ideas and people and places we think will help them learn and grow and thrive, and we want them to reach and be stretched by the kind of rigor and opportunity that will maximize their potential and their chances. And we're pretty sure we know best what it takes to succeed in today's world. High GPA, test scores, and admission to a tiny handful of right colleges. And we're quite eager as their parents to protect and direct them and be there for them at every turn, whatever it takes to ensure they achieve those outcomes. We mean so very well, but in communities like yours and mine in Palo Alto, doing whatever it takes has come to mean what I call the checklisted childhood. This is a childhood where parents are afraid of parks and playgrounds and sidewalks, where we arrange play and then watch over it to make sure it's enriching and that everyone is taking turns and getting along, where we praise every little unimpressive effort on the sidelines of their overscheduled lives. And we're constantly obsessively vigilant over grades and scores and homework. And accordingly, in the checklisted childhood, while everything is safe, selected, chosen, recommended, planned, decided, approved, improved, done, accomplished, handled, coached, figured out, erased, rewritten, fixed, arranged, solved, resolved, absolved, shaped, designed, orchestrated, and dreamed for our kids. Damn. And then we hover over our kids as they check off all the items on the checklist, the grades and the scores and the accolades and the awards and the sports, etc. And hovering over them, we keep them safe and sound and fed and watered. And when we see an obstacle in their path, we try to remove it, while all along encouraging them along toward that GPA, all those APs, the higher scores, accolades, and awards, nudging, cajoling, hinting, helping, haggling, nagging as the case may to be sure they're not screwing up, not closing doors, not ruining their future. We call for help when needed in the form of tutors, coaches, and handlers, and then the extra spiffy coaches and handlers in order to improve the child in front of us. We say we just want them to be happy, but too often when they come home, what we ask about first is their homework and their grades. And they see in our faces that love, that approval, that maybe their very worth comes from taking the harder classes and from getting A's. And when the work is difficult, we stand ever closer, running alongside them with clucking praise like a trainer at the Westminster Dog Show. Coaxing them to just jump a little higher, soar ever farther, arguing and contending with the rule makers, teachers, coaches, principals, referees, when they fall or fail, forcing them back onto the path, using our own strength to boost their effort. Our kids are breathless at the end of this childhood. their ears drooping from the constant drone of our chirps of "perfect, great job, buddy." Rhetorical tics often devoid of meaning. And we commend them to our friends and with stickers on the backs of our cars. And we commend ourselves. Look what we've done. Yeah, we worked so hard on that project. Boy, yeah, that glue gun, that was really hard. Oh, yeah, we got an A on that essay. Oh, we got a B. I need to call the teacher. I don't know how we got a B. Oh, yeah, we've already submitted our college apps. I can tell you recognize that. In communities like yours and mine and all over the country, as I've discovered, where parents have some disposable time and income to invest in really trying to be there in every conceivable way for our kids, this is what it looks and feels like to be a kid. We are constantly there doing everything and every little thing for them. And when I finally connected the dots between that dinner with parents of Stanford freshmen and what was happening at dinner in my own house, I realized, well, parents can't just magically let go of their college freshmen if they've been holding so tightly to their 17-year-old and their 16-year-old and so on. I realized that childhood is actually meant to do the opposite, meant to provide opportunity after opportunity for our kids to gain more and more skills toward building independence. Childhood should be a time when they can try and fail and try again and to learn to do and think for themselves. And childhood used to do that, and childhood would do that if only we'd let it. But we don't. We're so afraid if they fall or fail or flail or flounder or fumble, if we don't prevent those things, if we don't do it for them, that they won't get into college, that they literally will have no future. Or maybe we're just afraid they won't have the kind of future we want to brag about. But this omnipresent over-involvement of parents can mean that kids grow to be chronologically adult but remain somewhat stunted, as I saw in more and more of my students each year, dependent upon their parents to do not only the planning, deciding, implementing, figuring out, problem-solving, handling, and coping of life, but dependent upon parents to do the lovely, light, ethereal dreaming as well. Look, my book is called How to Raise an Adult, but it could just as easily have been called The Road to Hell. I don't know why my publisher didn't like that title. Because we planned and paved and protected our child's perfect path with the very best of intentions. But if you look at what we've done, if you have the courage to really look at it, you see that when we've walked so closely alongside our kids, when we've not only told them what to do with their lives, but how to do it in every moment, when we do the work for them when they struggle, and even when they aren't struggling, we just overhelp a little bit to ensure they're getting that extra edge. When we push, when we make them study a certain thing, shape their dreams, tell them who they must be to make us proud, handle all the other stuff of life so they can focus solely on academics and activities, we've actually undermined our kids' chance to make their own way. Too many playwrights and poets are forced into STEM. A teenager committed suicide in my community, and his obituary included his extremely high ACT score. And you know what the worst part of this is? Besides how arrogant it is to force someone else's life path to a particular college or career, how unethical it is to do their schoolwork, how cruel it is to be a constant crutch that will not always be able to be there for them, how harmful it is to make them feel that our love is conditioned on admission to a certain school. The worst part? Unintended yet insidious, that results when we live right up in their heads all the time, like our very own version of being John Malkovich, is that our kids get the message, hey kid, I don't think you can do any of this without me. trying to boost them up, we are paradoxically tearing them apart. We overhelp so as not to disadvantage them, yet they can be quite disadvantaged if we do too much. You can't be trusted with the task of being successful in your own life, kid, is the hidden message. You need me to direct and guide you. You'll always need me alongside you. I believe in humans, and I have to tell you that though we act with the best of intentions, I think we're smothering the life, the very sense of self, out of our kids, our precious kids. We're mammals, you know. We may be mammals who wear clothing and have cell phones, but like our counterparts out there in the wild, our job as parents is to put ourselves out of a job and raise our offspring to have the capability to do for themselves and think for themselves and feel for themselves. Yes, we gave them life, but life is to be lived. In order for our sons and our daughters to become the beautifully unique individual they are, we have to let them become themselves. And more than that, we won't be around forever, so we need to know our adult children can actually fend for themselves. And I looked it up. Fend means look after and provide for oneself without any help from others, not call your parents or text them and have them fend for you. We're supposed to want them to build skills toward independence, feel proud that they're lengthening their distance from us. But these days we seem sickly engaged somewhat by their need to constantly need us, which is a need that we manufactured. The best-selling author and psychologist Madeline Levine, and former fan speaker twice. Many of you know her work, Price of Privilege, Teach Your Children Well. Raise your hands. You know Madeline's work. She's a friend. Madeline says, for the sake of our kids' mental health and wellness, we must not do, number one, what our kid can already do, number two, what they can almost do, and number three, what is just about our own ego. Don't do what your kid can already do, can almost do, because that's where the learning happens. And don't do what's just about your own ego. Well, what can they do for themselves? What should they be able to do over time? When I went looking for a list of skills a human is supposed to have by adulthood, I couldn't find one, which I deduced meant childhood would teach a kid those things in a normal course. But then I found a goldmine in the special needs community, a list of skills an 18-year-old should have. When you've got a kid with special needs, you're a parent or an educator, you have to be deliberate about trying to teach those skills because the disability might otherwise get in the way. My friend Stacy Ashland, a leader in Palo Alto, has two kids, one with special needs and one developing typically. And she says she teaches both of her kids skills this simple way. First, you do it for them, then you do it with them, then you watch them do it, and then they do it completely on their own. Think about it. Think about learning to cross the street. First, you do it for them. They're in your arms, they're just being held. You're doing all the work. Then when they're old enough, you do it with them. You hold their hand, but you're doing the narrating. First, we look left and right and left. Is it clear to cross? Oh, no, there's a car coming. All right, let's check again. Left and right. They're listening to you. You're teaching them. Left and right and left. Okay, it's safe to cross. Let's go. And together you walk out across that street. This is step 2, and you do that enough times that you can move to the very terrifying step 3, which is you watch them do it. You're not holding their hand. They're narrating. They're doing the thinking. They've been listening to your teaching. And they say in their little voice that they're going to look left and right and left. And when they say, okay, it's safe, and they step out, you're there with your big, strong, loving arm to say, wait a minute, babe. There's a car coming out from behind the garbage truck. Sometimes that happens. All right? And then the kid goes back to looking, and the kid decides, and together you walk across the street, and you do that enough times that you can have confidence. You can come listen to a speaker on a Wednesday night. You're so smart. You know where I'm going. And your kid could be crossing the street right now without you. If you think about it, it applies to learning to cross the street. This four-step method applies to putting the homework into the backpack, which one day will be the bag, which one day will be the briefcase, to buying and making food, to keeping a home clean and organized, to putting gas in the car and being able to get from here to there by following a map or an app, but not by texting a parent, to filling out forms which might begin as a simple application for an opportunity at school, which becomes a form to get into the right college, and a form that will ultimately be an income tax or a contract or a lease for their own apartment. However high our kids' GPAs and test scores may be, we've inadequately prepared them for life if they're reliant upon us as adults to do those things that I just mentioned and things like them. Folks, we have to teach our kids to do more for themselves, not only for our kids' sake, but also for our own. I have said to you a number of times tonight that I believe in humans, and guess what? That includes all of us parents too. Too many of us are spending our lives scheduled to the hilt between work and home, homework and homeroom, practice tests and practice fields, just trying to keep up with the judgmental Joneses. Ours is an endless shuffle to a rehearsal, a practice, a tutoring session, an expert of some kind designed to make our kid better at something. We're on autopilot in our minivans, going through the motions, making the snacks, being on the committees, arguing with the teachers and principals and coaches and referees, serving as our kids' concierge, personal assistant, handler, secretary, criticizing our spouse's behavior or withering under their behavior and expectations. Vaguely wondering when we'll get off the sidelines of someone else's soccer practice and maybe start living a little bit of our own life again. Our morning medication is caffeine. Our evening medication is wine. Or as they told me in Atlanta, bourbon. What is it here? Beer? Wine. It's wine. It's wine. The people in the front decided for the rest of you. It's wine. After this, go home and have some wine. Long, long, long gone are the days of a parent saying, I'll throw open the back door or the front door, and you just get out there and play. I'll call you for dinner. Anyone remember that? Raise your hand high. Right. There are no wide open doors anymore, or afternoons for that matter, and no one is home to play with. If you're a boomer or Gen Xer, that is history. Your history. If you're a millennial, boy, that sounds like fiction. Nope, there's no time for that. No room in the afternoons. There's only the schedule and the drop-off and the pickup and some semblance of that family dinner we know we're supposed to have, and then the homework, all that homework, until some set of us plus them is exhausted. Sleep. Repeat. When I was writing How to Raise an Adult, a mom in my community pulled me aside at a meeting and pleaded, Julie, when did childhood get so stressful? I put my hand on her shoulder, and as tears slowly filled her eyes, another mother who had overheard us walked toward us nodding, and then she leaned in and she said, Julie, do you realize how many moms in our community are medicated for anxiety? I didn't know the answer to either question, but a growing number of conversations like this with parents like these became yet another reason to write this book. I guess you could kind of say that my role as a college dean, working with other people's grown-up sons and daughters, afforded me a view of the future that frightened me. And now I'm running back to the present to warn those of us still raising kids that this overly protective, overly directive, hand-holding way of parenting, it leads to a cliff up ahead. And we have to go another way. I'm here with this book and this rhetoric and this book tour and some kind of presumed authority that comes from it all. But did you really need me to say any of this to you, Glenbrook North? Did you? No. You know it. We know it. We all know it. We hear about 20-somethings, even 30-somethings failing to launch, lacking the skills to live on their own or get a job, or even in this tough economy when it might make sense to live at home, chronologically adult but behaving like children still under the parents' roof. We see our children withering under the pressure of this checklisted childhood. We feel ourselves struggling to do all that parents must do these days to ensure that checklist is adhered to, and we remember our own freer childhoods lived not all that long ago, and we fantasize about a different, saner way for our kids and for ourselves and for our families, perhaps Wyoming. Yet we look over our shoulder and see the galloping herd of other parents who are constantly hovering over their kids, cultivating them like precious little bonsai trees, spending more money, hiring more help, taking more time off just to ensure their kid makes the grade, makes the cut, gets admitted to that school over our kid, bragging about their kids' outcomes. We want to trust our instincts. We wish we were brave enough to walk away, focus more on family time, not test prep, incite a bit of laughter in our homes, not tears, prompt joy. Let our kids just be kids occasionally. But we fear that herd and the short-term win their kid will achieve with all of that help. Even when we know better. The overparenting herd is like a bully we feel the need to go along with lest we be hurt by it even further. Guys, we love our children with a driving force. I think of it as an aching, fierce terror joy that we can barely comprehend. You know as well as I do, it is the most humbling, precious, bewildering task to try to raise another human and to be alongside young humans unfolding into their adolescent and adult selves. That can be ugly before it's beautiful. But that's how it goes. 10 years ago, when I wrote my first piece on the harm of overparenting for the Chicago Tribune, I was just a college dean with a lot of compassion for the young adults around me and a mom who had a mounting concern that something is just not right. 10 years later, there's abundant evidence from study after study from the field of psychology that our overprotection, overdirection, and excessive handholding harms kids. It deprives them of life skills. It renders them less capable in the workplace that doesn't come with a checklist and leads to much higher rates of anxiety and depression. According to the 2013 study of 100,000 college students conducted by the American College Health Association, they surveyed 100,000 college students from 153 campuses. That includes all the biggest brand names and about 130 others. These students, 100,000, reported that over the last year, they had I've got it wrong. 84%, okay. I always have trouble with statistics. Of these 100,000 college students reporting their behavior and feelings over the last year, 84.3% said they were overwhelmed by all they had to do. 60.5% were very sad. 57% were very lonely. 51.3% felt overwhelming anxiety. 46.5% felt things were hopeless. Remember, this was from kids all over, tiers 1, 2, and 3, large universities and small colleges, Midwest, East, West, North, South. It's not just those who get into and attend the most elite schools. By doing too much for them in childhood, the protection, the overbearing direction, the hand-holding, we deprive them of the chance to build something called self-efficacy, which is a foundational tenet of the human psyche, the core understanding that one's own actions lead to outcomes. If Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am," well, self-efficacy is basically, "I do, therefore I am." There's an undermining of self-efficacy in childhood itself today by well-intentioned but over-involved parents everywhere. There's also a new field of psychology called emerging adulthood, which claims that this inability, this lack of skills in 20-somethings, you can tell how I feel about it, can't you, is a new developmental phase in the life of humans, in the evolution of humans. And the purveyor of this approach wrote a book recently called Getting to 30, A Parent's Guide. A parent's guide? Give me a break. Are you kidding me? Darwin must be rolling over in his grave. If we're going to let an entire cohort off the hook for their own psychosocial and skills development and push adulthood back to 30, well, then we'd better seriously rethink sending an 18-year-old off to fight for our country on behalf of the ideals and values we cherish. Or letting them vote, for that matter. If it exists at all, I think emerging adulthood is simply the vestigial tale of an overparented childhood. It seems to occur only in those young people who've been raised amid some affluence. My book tour is taking me all over the country, and I've now had a number of conversations with high school students. It'll be at an assembly, and I'll tell them I'll be talking to their parents later that night, and I ask them, what would you have me tell your parents to do or not do, or do differently to be more supportive of you in high school? Usually they're silent when I say that, and I say, it'll be anonymous. It's okay. They'll never know that you said it. I'm just the conduit. And they're silent, and I say, I know you're scared. I know you're scared. You don't want to hear, you're worried about what your friends might think if you say it. But I promise you there are other people in this auditorium who feel the way you do. And when I say that, their hands go up. And they say things like, would you please tell our parents that there are more colleges than they think? They say, please don't care so much about every little thing. Please don't micromanage me. It's scary. I put pressure on myself. I don't need more from you. I have no social life, but I need one. You say you listen, but you don't hear me. Please start believing in me and stop comparing me to my peers or your friends' kids. The mother in me just aches when these kids say this to me, and I'm hearing it all over the country. Look, there's a lot that's wrong in society, larger forces that both constrain and impel us as parents, such as the myth promulgated by U.S. News that there are only a tiny handful of colleges that offer a great education where we could be proud to send our kids. But let's not forget that we have tremendous control at what I call the local level of our kitchen counter and our dining table, where we've got children who needed dinner tonight and who'll need breakfast in the morning. Our kids don't need a fearful parent, a tiger parent, or a concierge. They need a parent who knows that our job is to build competence and confidence and ultimately independence. Join me, will you, in doing right by our children, by leaving the herd of hoverers. Embrace that free play is what children are supposed to do for their developmental wellness. That kids need life skills, need to think for themselves, they need a work ethic, they need to know that failure is okay and they'll be fine. They need a wider set of college options, and they need a chance to chart their own path in life. Together, we can push the parenting pendulum back in the other direction, away from overprotected, overdirected, handheld, anxiety and depression-riddled forever children, and toward raising healthy, happy, successful adults. Thank you.